Okay, I got a member request from Aistad to review Plastic Memories. This is an anime show from 2015. It was pretty good, but kind of heavy, so you definitely have to be in a certain mood for it. Overall, I enjoyed it, but there was a couple issues I had with it. This is a story that the plot tells you what it is in pretty much the first episode, so I'm going to be kind of loose with spoilers. The premise of the story is that an 18-year-old boy, Tsukasa Mizugaki, gets a job at this place where their job is to retrieve Griftias. And Griftias are these future artificial intelligence android human type things that are pretty much realistic humans. They go to the bathroom, they shower, they can have sex with them, they have feelings. You wouldn't know that they were not human unless you were told. But the Griftias have a lifespan of 9 years and 4 months. The main girl, Isla, is a Griftia, and in the first episode, Tsukasa falls in love with her at first sight. We find out very quickly into the story that Isla has about 3 months left to live. Find out like the second episode. So it's very apparent where this story is going from the beginning. So what I really want to talk about with this story is more of the world and the philosophy and the questions that it poses as opposed to the story. Because the story itself is obviously he's in love with someone who's essentially terminally ill. There's been a million stories like that. It seems like they just want you to cry. It's well done, but at the end of the day, it's not a super happy watch. So the more interesting part to me is kind of the philosophy. So one of the main obvious themes of the show is if you know that someone is terminally ill, how should you behave toward them? Tsukasa, the main guy, obviously says that he loves Isla and he's intent on sticking with her all the way until the end. Isla is opposed to this because she knows it's going to hurt him, and the happier that they are together, the more it's going to hurt when she dies, and she knows the exact date of her death. So this is something that's ongoing throughout the season that they struggle with, and I think it's a really interesting thing. Obviously, when you have all these happy memories with somebody, it makes it that much harder when you lose them. But are you just going to avoid happiness your entire life, keep yourself from getting hurt? Kind of the crux of the story here. So that's really the heart of like the character issues in the show, is that Isla is trying to push herself away from everyone, be very detached. And Tsukasa's like, you can't just not enjoy your life because it's going to hurt people. And the show, she has a couple months when he finds out. And something I think is interesting about that is he still decides to pursue a relationship with her after he finds out. So I kind of wonder, if everyone knew the day they were going to die, what time length people would need to say, okay, it's worth it to get hurt like that. Obviously in the show, everyone's calling him an idiot. He works with a bunch of people who all have experience with these Griftias. These Griftias are a really important part of the world. Like pretty much every person has a connection to them. One girl was raised by a Griftia. You see throughout the show that they have like kid Griftias that function for old people as like grandchildren. You see people who use the Griftias as lovers. You see them as older siblings who replace parents. So they're really important. They're not just pets for fun or anything like that. So everyone's calling him an idiot because they're like, she's going to be gone soon. And the show obviously makes the argument that you should maximize your time of happiness with somebody while you can. And I do wonder if 1 month, I think most people would say no, but what about a year? Like at what point would people be like, okay, this relationship is worth it, knowing how it's going to end? Because in a weird way, every relationship that you have, you know how it's going to end eventually. Assuming you don't end the relationship for other reasons, there's only one way for it to go. It's kind of a depressing thought, but that's what the show is really getting at the heart of, is that kind of idea. And I think the show is probably correct. Now, me personally, if I met some chick and she was like, hey, I've got 1 month to live, I don't know if I want to put myself through that. Like, it's hard for me to even imagine, adopting a dog that only has a few months left or something, because that's just really hard on somebody emotionally. So the show is a pretty extreme version of that argument. One of the other big points of the show is obviously, how do you treat non-human entities that are essentially human? It does some things throughout the show that are interesting, where they talk about the robots having human rights, but they don't put transmitters in them, even though sometimes they try to run away when their expiration date's coming up. The reason that they have to retrieve them is because if they fail to do so, they go crazy and become really dangerous. So, they do have like human rights, quote unquote. People date them, they treat them like family. But then when they talk about changing their hardware, they essentially describe it as like overwriting their entire operating software. And when they get hurt, they go to an engineer, not a medical facility. But then at the same time, you have people who obviously love them and care about them because they've been part of their life for almost a decade. And another thing that it does that I think is really interesting is when they go to retrieve the Griftias, they give them 3 options. They can get a new one, like completely. They can get a similar one at a discount or just not get another one. Or they can use the same one and replace the software so it'd be like a new person but in the same body. And I think all of these are really interesting, but the idea of having someone essentially replace their soul, but then still walk around looking the same, I think is something that I don't know if I would ever choose. And it's something that the characters deal with in different ways throughout the show. Like one of the grandmas doesn't mind at all. She's like, yeah, I've done it before. She's okay with granddaughter looking the same, but having a completely different personality. But then they have other people who are like, I don't want to see that person again because they look like someone that I used to know and care about. So you really get to see this all throughout the show. I think philosophically it's a really interesting show. And even though it came out almost a decade ago, these issues are probably going to be more relevant now than ever with how rapidly AI is developing. I mean, if you watch anime, you've probably gotten ads on your phone for like waifu girlfriend app who talks to you or whatever. But yeah, overall, a really interesting show for sure. The main issues that I had with it there was two. One issue that I had with it was that the tone is kind of all over the place. The first like half the season is pretty rough to watch. Kind of reminded me of Violet Evergarden, where almost every episode is pretty emotional. And obviously the last one is. But then from like episode 6 or 7 all the way until the end, it wants to be a rom-com, but you kind of have this looming dread over it because you already know how it's going to end. Like the ending is something they reiterate throughout the season. Like they actually make a point to have one of the other characters run into a droid that had their memories wiped, but none of her memories even come close to coming back. She's a new person. And they say it's impossible. The software has been replaced completely. So there's no hope of the kind of love wins, happy ending, whatever shit. It's very clear from early on the ending is going to be what it's going to be. So tonally, I just felt like that was weird. And I know it's done because you don't want the whole show to be miserable to watch. And also you want it to have emotional impact when the ending does happen. So it is effective in that way, but it also kind of feels a little bit manipulative to me. And then the other issue that I had, and this is more of just a preference thing, is I wish they had gotten rid of like one episode of the rom-com stuff. And instead, I wish they had chosen to do like an epilogue type episode where we see him move on and, he's happy again. And maybe even he has a girlfriend because there's a girl on the show that obviously likes him the whole time who's a human, but they don't really do anything with it. And like they do a very brief flash forward at the end. And like kind of the implicit cliffhanger, I'll go ahead and spoil it for you, is you see him shake the hand of his next partner and it's the same droid as Isla, but we all know that she can't have the same personality. So it kind of is like, well, is he going to have this shallow love with these girls where he falls in love with them because of how they look? Or is he getting over it and he can work with her even though it looks like her? Or is he just going to keep falling in love with each version of Isla? I think it would have been much more appropriate for him to kind of accept it and move on. Maybe even date the girl in the office that likes him and have them reminisce about her a little bit. Because the whole theme of the show is creating happy memories. So to me, that would have been a little bit more appropriate than having it go the ambiguous, open ending, he's just kind of happy route. But also not much seems to have changed really. So those are like my biggest issues with it are just the tone. And I just prefer closed up endings. And I think a closed up ending with him being happy about his memories with her would have been much more on point with the theme than just kind of the ambiguous one. A minor complaint that's not a huge one is that they say how many hours she has left. And at one point they say it's like whatever number of hours is about 35 days or something. But then we see a bunch of time go by in the show and they just keep saying she has a month left, like all the way until right before the end. Not a huge thing, just kind of annoying that they either didn't keep track of time or just didn't care or whatever when that's like a huge part of the show. But overall, it's a good show. Another good member recommendation. Even though I know Aistad in real life, obviously appreciate him supporting the channel. Don't appreciate him being a twat and making me watch sad shit with it, but that we do shit. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there for this one. I'll apologize again for the mic clipping. I really have been messing with the settings the last couple of days and trying different things, and I just cannot seem to find the issue. Unfortunately, because of real life, I don't have time to sit here for hours on end until it gets figured out. So I am spending a little bit of time each day to try to figure it out, but then I have to make the videos because I have other shit that I need to take care of. So I'll apologize for the quality of the audio. I know it's frustrating to listen to, and it's frustrating for me. For me, the effort that goes into the video is the same regardless. I have to watch the whole show. I have to record, edit, upload, and it's just time consuming. So it's really frustrating for me when the quality is a little bit shitty and I can't figure out why. This probably won't come out for about a week and a half. Maybe I'll have this issue resolved by then, or maybe I'll have to use something that's not OBS. I'm not sure. I'm going to leave it there for this one. Let me know if you guys have seen the show, what you think. If you end up watching it, let me know what you thought. If you're still here, like and subscribe and all that. And I appreciate the members and their requests. Thanks. See ya.